Hi. So you might have followed the India New Zealand men's T20 International series both through my channel and elsewhere. We saw that New Zealand won the series 2-1, winning the first and the third games. At the same time, there was, as the men's tournament, there was also the women's teams of the two countries played a T20 series. They were all double headers. They were played in the same venues on the same days as the men's games, with the women playing in the afternoon and the men playing in the evening. So let's take a look in this video as what happened in that series. I mean, New Zealand won that series 3-0, but it was a much more interesting series than the final scoreline suggests. So let's look at the games of the women's series between India and New Zealand that was played last week. So the first game happened in Wellington. New Zealand batted first and made 159 for four. You can. I must mention something about the model here is that the model has been calibrated for men's cricket. It is all based on men's cricket data, but I've kind of slightly adjusted downwards the overall score to kind of account for the changes in men's and women's cricket. I mean, historically, it's been noticed that women's games are lower scoring than men's games. Anyway, that aside, so let's look at what happened in game one between New Zealand and India. New Zealand batted first and made 159. And then India's chase was an innings of two parts. As you can see, first they batted really strongly, and after 11 overs, India was 102 for one. And then Smriti Mandhana got out, and then followed a procession, and India ended up being all out for 136. It was an absolutely spectacular collapse. It was kind of mirrored by the a similar collapse by the men's team later that day. You might remember that once Vijay Shankar had gotten Rishabh Pant and Vijay Shankar had gotten out in that game, India pretty much collapsed and lost the game. But the women's game was a bit more spectacular because when the men's team collapsed in Wellington, they were well behind the chase, and the New Zealand had made a 210 or something. Here, at the time of the point of collapse, India required 58 or 52, which is a very easily gettable score in T20 internationals. And so that's why you see the graph being way down. And then, Mandana got out, and that led to the procession. I mean, if we were to look at the important innings, we see that like India actually lost 16 for 5 starting from the time when Mandana got out, and it was in 33 balls. So not only did India kind of lose wickets in that period, but also kind of really slowed down the scoring. So here, for example, there's an annotation of a partnership between Harmanpreet Kaur, the captain, and Reddy, which was they only scored 6 in 10 balls, which is not something you expect in T20s. And then once you had this period of losing 16 for 5 and 33 balls, I mean, there's pretty much nothing else left in the game. I mean, New Zealand ran away with the winners. In terms of the performances, of course, like we had Smriti Mandhana, who had a plus 42% impact on the game, but pretty much the middle order let her down, and despite her putting Jemima Rodriguez, the opener, had done a pretty good job as well. But the middle order pretty much let down India, and Harmanpreet Kaur did badly, and that's a theme we'll see through the series. For New Zealand, I mean, Sophie Devine did extremely well with both with the bat. It was actually her innings that had revived New Zealand after they had a bit of a slump in the middle. So now, when we look at the second game, let's just turn off the events and look at the second game between New Zealand and India. This time, this was in Auckland, and this time India batted first. And what you can see is that, like again, India kind of lost an early wicket. I think Punya, who was the opener in all three games, didn't really play too well, so she got out early. But then, like again, the familiar partnership of like Mandhana and Rodriguez kind of got together, and India was 50 for one after 5 overs, and then began a slump. So like let's kind of look at some of the annotations, and then you see that like yeah, they kind of made only 65 for 3 in 77 balls. Once again, you can see that after Mandana and Rodriguez got out, like the middle order kind of completely failed India. So I think these are like standard themes we are seeing through the tournament, right? Punia, who was the opener, did badly. Harmanpreet Kaur never got going, and then Hemalata and Deepthi Sharma, none of them really performed. And like from 50 for one in 5 overs, India ended up with only 135 for six, which was pretty much poor score. But then what we see is that, like, I mean, like, the bowlers responded well. At one point, after around 7 overs, New Zealand was 40 for 2, which it's just like, I mean, it's still a good position chasing 135, but like, I mean, it could have been anybody's game because, like, New Zealand had lost like 7 for 2 in 15 balls. But then after that, I mean, they managed to recover and took a huge advantage. Even then, I mean, like, towards the end, I mean, like, the Indian women managed to pull something back and brought the game back to back to par. But then, like, I mean, New Zealand finally ended up winning the game. I mean, it wasn't a character. I mean, they needed nine of the last over, which was bowled by Joshi, and they hit that. So it's sort of again a close game, but like something like India should have won. I mean, there was a point where India was 50 for 1 after 5 overs, and it's a pity that they couldn't win the game from it. So now that brings us to the third game, which was played in Hamilton again on the same day as the men's team. So this was again one of those games where New Zealand batted first, made 160. I mean, they were at one point they were 138 in 15 overs. So the last few overs, India really managed to pull back the game pretty strongly. But then, like, I mean, like, the Indian batting team again, it had a familiar look to it. So pulling on the annotations again, you see that again. You see the familiar names here: Rodriguez and Mandhana. Rodriguez and Mandhana, they 13, 19. Mandhana hit the 39 in 23, and then Rodriguez got out. Mandhana actually did well with Harmanpreet Kaur, so she Kaur at least got going. But then, like, the Kaur got out, and then, like, Mandhana got out. And at that point, at the time when Smriti Mandhana got out, like, India needed 39 of 27. It's again not a very, it's not a very big ask for T20s, even in the women's game, which is a little lower scoring. But what's important to notice is that, like, in this period around the time when Smriti Mandhana got out, even before she got out, they started slowing down. India scored only 7 for 1 in 15 balls in this time period, and that period completely pulled the game in New Zealand's way. And then, so the other interesting thing about the third T20 match was that Mithali Raj, who had been controversially left out of the semi-finals of the World T20 in November, we'll just come to that in a little bit. She was recalled to the team, and she batted at number 5 after Harmanpreet Kaur. Again, by the way, the scorecard looks familiar. Mandana and Rodriguez batting reasonably well, and nobody else really contributing. But what we saw here is that Mithali Raj, kind of like, you see the annotations here. Raj Sharma only 4 in 7, Sharma Raj only 7 in 10, and so on. So they really batted slowly. I mean, New Zealand won only by 2 runs, but like, both of them, they batted in a seemingly very un-T20 manner, which leads to the question of whether it was whether Mithali Raj deserved to be recalled to the team at all. So let's just, but again, it was an extremely close game. I mean, like, I wish I had watched this again, because like the other two games in the series, it was incredibly close going either way. And then finally, it was the slow batting of India's middle order. I mean, the India's middle order has been an absolute letdown through the series, and that contributed to the loss once again. So now let's just dig a little deeper into whether Mithali Raj should have been recalled, and let's look at the last game she played for India. This was back in November, where she played in the game against Australia, but I don't think she batted. I don't think she batted in the game, or no, she didn't. The game against Australia was the one that Raj missed because of injury, and then she was controversially left out of the semi-finals. Raj played again in the game against Ireland, and she scored a 50. She scored 51 of 56, and I think she was the player of the game in this game, which India won comfortably by 52 runs. But then, if you look at the annotations, we see that, like, Raj didn't really do very well. She made 4 in 15, and then there was a period where she hit 26 in 11, but again slowed down in the latter half of the T20 innings to score only 21 in 26. So it's like a kind of, even though she made 51 and 56, and while the flurry of late India wickets might suggest that it was good that she batted slowly because it was a tough pitch. But India was set for possibly set for a lot more had she not batted so slowly. So even though it was kind of a player of the match performance, it wasn't something that really contributed to the team's cause. Of course, a few days before that, she uh, did do much better in the game against Pakistan, which, of course, for as you know, for which is an important game for India. And if you look at the contributions, she had a 30 percentage point contribution. So this was one extremely solid contribution by Mithali Raj to kind of help India beat Pakistan. But then, you take the Pakistan women's team is not strong. It's not like the Pakistan men's team. And if you take out this particular game, you if you see Mithali Raj's scores, we see that she hasn't done that well. In the third game of this series against New Zealand, we saw 24 of 20, which was a extremely slow scoring in the context of the game. 51 of 56 against Ireland was again like a was not a great innings. The game against Pakistan was good, and before that, even if you see 12 of 15, 11 of 7, 13 of 19, 17 of 11, 11 of 18, 0 out of 6. She hasn't really had a good time in T20 matches in 2018. She had a few good games early on in the year against South Africa, but and England. But since then, apart from this 97 not out against Malaysia, which I don't know how seriously we should take that, she hasn't really done well at all. So in that sense, I'm not really surprised that Mithali Raj got dropped for the semi-finals of the World Cup. Of course, India lost that game, being bowled out for a paltry 110 or something like that, so which added to the controversy. But it wasn't a bad decision to drop her. And again, when we come back to kind of the latest game, the last match against New Zealand in Hamilton, you see that it was pretty much the slow batting by Mithali Raj and Deepti Sharma that let India down. So I think going forward, I think India have made a few changes for the forthcoming series. I forget who that's against, but what's important that they get the middle order right. Harmanpreet Kaur coming back into form can be a big plus, but anyone else they can get into the 5 and 6 positions, because and also Punya at the top is just not working. I think they'll probably get someone like Tamana Bhatia or Sushma Verma to open the batting there. But yeah, Indian women's team needs a middle order. Yes.